So we're going to do a little bit of silent meditation. It's going to be tricky to keep the mind silent now, but we'll try. So again, we'll do the same meditation from yesterday. We'll divide it into 3 parts. The first part, in the beginning, we just keep our mind in the present, in the here and now. Be aware of the natural process of breathing. And all the thoughts, worries, distractions that can arise in the mind, we just simply let go. So this is the best way to let our mind rest and to become clear. So we'll do this exercise for a few minutes to calm the mind. And then when we hear the sound of the gong, we'll visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of us. And we'll concentrate on that figure, gold radiating light. And we visualize that light rays radiate to us, which we receive. And everything that affects us negatively, whatever kind of problem, physical, mental, external, internal, everything that's complicated and unpleasant in our life disappears, is purified by this light, this radiant nectar. So maintain the mind a few minutes on this process, on this meditation. Then the third time you hear the gong, we visualize that this figure of Buddha, this body of light, absorbs into us, absorbs into our heart. And we think that our body and mind become inseparable with the holy body and mind of Buddha Shakyamuni. And then we visualize that from our heart we radiate this light, golden light, the nature of love and compassion to all sentient beings. So we can imagine this energy radiating out from our heart like a bubble, expanding to the beings close to us and slowly, slowly encompassing all beings in all directions. Spreading this peaceful, loving energy which purifies them completely. So we'll do this meditation for a few minutes. Try to keep the mind concentrated with vigilance. And every time with mindfulness we notice that the mind is distracted, remember to let go, to let that thought pass. So we'll just quickly check our body posture, make sure we're sitting in the correct position. With the back straight. Now, with the mind a little bit calmer, we generate a good motivation, an altruistic motivation, thinking in order to benefit all sentient beings who are unlimited, who are numberless, like space. I have to achieve enlightenment. I have to purify my mind from all the obscurations and the afflictions, karma and delusion. I have to develop all the positive aspects, obtain all the qualities in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. With this motivation, to be able to achieve the state of enlightenment, to benefit all sentient beings, I'm going to dedicate this time to analyze and to practice the teachings. So today, I'm going to try and talk a little bit about the Bodhisattva Vows. So when we take this tantric initiation, we're going to receive the Bodhisattva Vows, and then we'll leave time at the end for questions. So in general, about the Bodhisattva Vows, in Buddhism we speak a lot about vows and the importance of taking vows. So it's important to understand the meaning and the purpose of taking the Bodhisattva Vows. So there's, in general, three types of vows. The vows of individual liberation, in Sanskrit pratimoksha, then the Bodhisattva vows, and then tantric vows. So in general, there's three groups, three distinct groups of vows. So the first group, the vows for individual liberation, are basically all designed to avoid situations or actions that are negative and will impede our practice of Dharma. So the purpose of keeping these vows is to be able to have a good ethical conduct of body, speech and mind, to avoid all of that which is an obstacle to practice. So the reason for this is that if we don't watch our actions, watch our ethical conduct, our life, is already full of problems, full of obstacles. So without the practice of ethics, we're going to cause problems in this life, in future lives. So this is a great obstacle to practicing Dharma. So the ethical conduct of keeping our body, speech and mind in these vows will protect us. And this is really going to help us. And it's something necessary if we want to practice meditation. These pratimoksha vows, the vows of personal liberations. So when we take refuge, we receive these. When we take refuge, if we like, we can, as well as the promises we take with refuge, we can take these vows of personal liberation, which would be to avoid killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and taking intoxicants. So refuge is the door to all the different practices within Buddhism. And if we've taken refuge, or we're going to take refuge, then we should try to keep these vows, or refrain from these 5 negative actions. So we can take these vows, 1, 2, 3, 4, or all 5 of them. But whether we take the vows or not, We have to try and protect our mind. We should try and abide in a pure ethical contact, avoiding these five. If not, however much effort we put into the spiritual path, the spiritual practice, and our meditation, we won't be able to progress. So this is the basis of all spiritual practices, keeping these 5 vows. So, super important to be able to keep our conduct pure and ethical. Otherwise, it's creating a great obstacle to spiritual practice. We could have the idea that taking vows is something like taking a big responsibility, or it's like someone, a teacher or the Buddha, creates some rules for us, restricts us, makes our life difficult. This is a completely wrong conception. The vows are basically advice, which if we want to progress, we should follow. If we want to progress in the meditation, in the spiritual path, the vows are advice for us to put into practice. So all spiritual practices, beginning with refuge, we should pay great attention to our body, speech and mind and avoid as much as possible negative actions. That's in general. We can go into great detail into these 5 lay vows, the pranamatra vows, and there's also the 8 Mahayana precepts that we can take during 24 hours. And then there's also the vows of an ordained monk, an ordained nun, a novice monk, fully ordained monk. In general, all of these enter into the pratimoksha vows, which are basically avoiding those actions, those negative actions, which are obstacles to the path, obstacles for our practice. So the second group of vows are the Bodhisattva vows. In the Bodhisattva vows, the emphasis is on changing our self-cherishing attitude, thinking in me, I, and changing that attitude for an attitude which cherishes others, an altruistic attitude that encompasses the welfare of others as more important than our own welfare. The Bodhisattva, the idea of the Bodhisattva, the goal of the Bodhisattva is to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So the practice of the Bodhisattva is to benefit others. So the Bodhisattva carries out those actions which bring benefit to others. So these are the vows of the Bodhisattva, vows which reduce self-cherishing and encourage the Bodhisattva attitude that cherishes others more than oneself. So the Bodhisattva vows refer to actions of speech, body, speech and mind. And it's something not easy to keep, especially those which are regarding actions of mind. It's not easy, but we have to try and keep these vows the best we can, try and keep our mind within these vows. But the emphasis, basically, in essence, is to change the self-cherishing thought, which motivates our actions, which up to now is what, if we analyze, is what is behind pretty much everything we do. All actions that we carry out, if we're honest, directed to achieve happiness and to achieve happiness for oneself. The Bodhisattva Vows, on the other hand, force us to pay attention to others as more important than oneself. And they're basically essential advice to be able to avoid that self-cherishing thought and to cultivate the thought that cherishes others. So we should know these vows, study these vows, and especially the ones which we can see that we have a habit of falling into error. Try and avoid these as much as possible. So we're not going to take these tantric vows in this initiation, but just to mention the tantric vows, the essence of these vows would be to see the teacher as Buddha, to have a pure view of the teacher as one with the Buddha, and also a pure view of oneself as a pure being, and to have a pure view, a pure vision of the place, the world around us, the beings in it. This is not easy. We can try and cultivate this pure view, but again and again our mind will fall into a very ordinary view, criticizing and seeing mistakes. So the Tantric Vows puts emphasis on developing a pure view, especially that view of seeing the teacher as one with the Buddha. And these Tantric Vows will help us become familiar with this. We'll train our mind in having a pure view. So another point about the vows, the Pratyekamoksha vows, the individual liberation vows, when we take these, we receive an explanation. Normally the teacher who gives us these vows will explain them, how to keep them, and the way we should keep them. But this explanation is not given until after we've received them. The Bodhisattva vows is something that we can know, we can read and study without having taken them before. It's something which is explained openly to everyone. And the Tantric vows are not explained to those who haven't taken them. So the Tantric vows, when we take them, the teacher will give us the vows and then explain the meaning of the vows. In general, the meaning of the three types of vows. The first type, the vows of individual liberation, are designed to avoid negative actions of body, speech and mind, to avoid everything which is an obstacle to our spiritual practice, to our Dharma practice. The Bodhisattva vows emphasize the changing of the egocentric, self-cherishing attitude for that of the altruistic, cherishing others more than oneself attitude. And then the Tantric vows emphasize the pure view of reality. And this is when we take an initiation of the highest class of Tantra. Once we've received that highest Tantra initiation, then we can receive an explanation of these Tantric vows and put them into practice. So this is just a brief explanation of the vows, these three types of vow. If we want to know more, there's books on this topic. So if we look at the Bodhisattva vows, which is something we're going to receive if we take a tantric initiation, any tantric initiation, So in any tantric initiation, we first go for refuge, we'll take refuge, and then we'll receive the Bodhisattva vows. So in general, the Bodhisattva vows, there are, in general there's the aspirational bodhicitta, or the wishing bodhicitta. So in Sanskrit, bodhi, enlightenment, and chitta is the thought. So literally it would be translated as the thought of enlightenment, or the wish to achieve enlightenment, bodhichitta. So this thought, in general, there's two types. There's the wishing or aspirational bodhicitta, developing that thought that thinks, may I achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, which is what we're repeating again and again in the prayers, what we're becoming familiar with. So generating this sincere thought in our mind would be the wishing bodhicitta, this aspirational bodhicitta that wishes to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings. Then we have the other type of bodhicitta, which is the strong determination to carry out all the practices, all those practices which are necessary to achieve enlightenment. So we think, just as the Buddhas of the past developed this thought of bodhicitta, I too will now develop this thought of bodhicitta. Just as the Buddhas of the past put into practice all these causes and conditions until they reached enlightenment, I too will now engage in all the actions of the Bodhisattva. So when we engage directly in the practice of the Bodhisattva with a strong determination, I'm going to practice the 6 perfections in order to achieve enlightenment. This is the commitment. It's not a mere desire, or a mere aspiration, or a mere wish. Now we're engaged actively in following step by step all the different practices until we reach enlightenment. So the Bodhisattva vows are directed towards the aspirational bodhicitta until we reach enlightenment. So there are some vows which are related to the wishing bodhicitta, and then some which are related to the engaged bodhicitta. So in general, about the aspirational bodhicitta, the advice or the vows have 2 aspects. How to maintain bodhicitta in this life, and how to create the conditions to be able to maintain this bodhicitta in future lives. How to be able to continue with this bodhisattva attitude. How to maintain bodhicitta in this life. The first is to develop, the first is to remember the benefits of bodhicitta, the advantages, to analyze and reflect on the numerous or innumerable benefits of this thought, of this mind. So the text of Shantideva, Bodhisattva Charyattara, is very inspiring and goes through all the benefits of this mind. So in general, we can mention 10 benefits. The first, it is a door to the Mahayana. So whether we enter into the Mahayana vehicle or not depends on this mind of bodhicitta. The practitioner who's developed bodhicitta in their mind, we can say has entered the Mahayana path. If we don't generate bodhicitta in a sincere, authentic way, however much effort we put into practices with our body, speech and mind, however much effort we put into meditating or austere practices, if we don't have that sincere motivation of bodhicitta, it is not a Mahayana path. It is not a Mahayana practice. So what determines whether our practice is a Mahayana practice or not is the mind of the bodhicitta. So this is the first benefit, the door to the Mahayana. So the second is if we develop this mind of bodhicitta, we are considered sons or daughters of the Buddha. So this is a term which refers to the Bodhisattva. We can say the Bodhisattvas are sons or daughters of the Buddha. As it is mentioned in the Heart Sutra, son of the lineage. Here, lineage refers to the lineage of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva path. And in the moment a person develops this motivation in a sincere, authentic way, they convert into a bodhisattva, or a person who has this lineage, a son or daughter of the lineage. So another benefit is that this bodhisattva attitude is brighter or eclipses the practice of the arhats, those practitioners who have achieved nirvana, the state of personal liberation. So even though the practitioner hasn't achieved liberation, that thought, that bodhicitta thought, is brighter or eclipses the realizations of an arhat. So an arhat has realized how things exist, has realized emptiness. Excuse me. So someone who's developed the mind of bodhicitta is superior to an arhat being who has the realization of emptiness. And that person who's realized bodhicitta on their mind stream becomes an object worthy of making offerings. So another benefit is that practitioner accumulates lots of merits, inconceivable amounts of merits, and purifies inconceivable amounts of negative karma. And all of their positive actions they can achieve without obstacle. And they will not have to experience obstacles such as lack of material wealth, being poor, etc. They will be free from adverse circumstances. The practitioner will become a source or a fountain of happiness for others, and will achieve all the stages of the path, all the way up to enlightenment. So if we read these benefits, if we read the verses of the Shantideva text, the guide to a bodhisattva's way of life, this can give us great energy, can stimulate us to be able to put time and effort into these bodhisattva practices. So another important point to be able to maintain bodhicitta in this life is to apply this advice into our daily practice. So to achieve this, we recite the prayer 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. So there's different versions of this prayer to develop bodhicitta. The most common one is to recite 3 times. I haven't got the verse in English, but it's the verse which says, just as the practitioners of the past carried out the actions of the bodhisattvas and worked for sentient beings to enlightenment, I too will carry out these practices. So there's many types of these verses which encourage the mind to develop that bodhicitta thought. So we should recite this verse at least 3 times. 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. So repeating it 3 times during the day and 3 times during the night is a way of making strong this bodhicitta motivation. Another important point is that other sentient beings may act negatively, but this shouldn't be an obstacle to our development of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the wish to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment, and that thought includes those beings which cause harm. So if we see beings causing harm, creating negative actions, causing suffering and problems, we shouldn't develop a negative attitude towards them, thinking, oh, I'm not going to work for them, I'm not going to benefit them. If this attitude arises in our mind, this is going to deteriorate our bodhicitta. So it's really important to develop the thought that thinks, even though there are evil beings in this world causing lots of problems and lots of suffering, that is not going to be an obstacle for my generating bodhicitta. These beings are an object of compassion. We should develop compassion towards them. So in order to maintain bodhicitta in this life, we should also put interest and energy into the practices of purification, practices of accumulating merit. Merit and wisdom. So we make requests, strong, heartfelt requests to the 3 jewels. Meditating on emptiness. So these practices will help us maintain bodhicitta in this life. In order to maintain bodhicitta in future lives, the advice is to abandon the 4 black dharmas and practice the 4 white dharmas. So we abandon the 4 negative dharmas and practice the white positive dharmas. These 4 negative dharmas to be avoided So not to lose our bodhicitta in future lives. The first is to deceive or use false words to our teacher. So hiding our faults from our teacher is a black dharma which we should avoid, to not lose the bodhicitta. So this is a really important point. The teacher, our guide, that person who is leading us along the path, in the same way that a sick person goes to see a doctor and will tell the doctor his symptoms and ask for advice, our relation with our teacher, with our spiritual guide, has to be an honest relationship. We should explain our defects and ask for advice, ask for help to be able to progress in the spiritual path. Because what happens quite often when we go to a teacher, instead of having that attitude that I'm a sick person and going to the doctor for help and advice, we go with the attitude of trying to appear as a very special person, someone who doesn't have any faults. So this is something which we all can fall into, this trap of when with our teacher, we hide our faults and we have that idea we want to receive the most secret, profound instruction. This would be like someone going to the doctor who's really sick and who sees the doctor and says, "No, I'm fine. I've nothing wrong with me." So that doesn't achieve anything. If we have a spiritual teacher, spiritual guide, the purpose of that is to be able to help us progress. So if we try and hide our faults and exaggerate our qualities, our virtues, it's not going to help us at all. It's completely pointless. So this point says we should be sincere, especially with the teacher, and not try and deceive or trick our spiritual guide. This would be an obstacle to continuing with the bodhicitta mind in future lives. So another point to bear in mind is when we create obstacles for someone who's practicing virtue. This is a black dharma. Or causing someone who's carried out good actions, positive actions, to repent, to regret those positive actions. This would be black dharma. The third black dharma would be to harm a bodhisattva with anger. And this we do when we criticize with anger someone who practices dharma, even if they have committed a fault. To get angry with them, to criticize them, to insult them, is committing one of these black dharmas. And this action is complete when we criticize someone, they hear our words and they understand them. Even if we don't say them directly to them, we're talking about them to someone else, trying to influence the way others think about them, or try to destroy their reputation. This is also committing this black dharma. So the fourth one is deceiving, or trying to give that impression that we're a great practitioner, when in reality we have many faults or we have a wrong motivation. So it's deceiving others. So these are the four black dharmas. The four black dharmas which can be an obstacle to continuing with bodhicitta in future lives. And the four white dharmas would be the complete opposites to these four black ones. So take that determination to be sincere, not only with the teacher but with all sentient beings. Try to avoid lying and deceiving, tricking, giving false impressions, even jokingly. Try and be very sincere and transparent with everyone. So the second white dharma is to not discriminate. Act the same with everyone, in the same way with everyone. Try not to impress some and then mistreat others. So an attitude which doesn't discriminate and acts the same positive way with all sentient beings. So third white dharma is to avoid criticizing bodhisattvas. Now at this point, as we don't know who's a bodhisattva and who isn't, there's lots of cases where there are bodhisattvas, but they can appear in a very ordinary form with defects and showing the aspect of creating negative actions. But we shouldn't judge, we shouldn't be critical because we don't know. So especially those beings who are practicing Dharma, trying to progress in the spiritual path, we shouldn't criticize them because we don't know who's a bodhisattva and who's not. The fourth one is to take responsibility to lead sentient beings into the Mahayana, encouraging others to practice and rejoicing in the virtue and practice of others. Supporting when we can any practitioner, anybody interested in practicing Dharma, and developing love and compassion. So this would be the four white dharmas, which are opposite to the four black dharmas. And this is to avoid the bodhicitta degenerating in future lives. So this is regarding the aspirational bodhicitta, the wishing bodhicitta. Regarding the engaged bodhicitta, or the Bodhisattva Vows, this is the advice or the promises that we take when we determine to practice everything that is necessary to achieve enlightenment. So people ask if we're sincere, if we ask ourselves, am I capable of generating this? It can appear as something impossible. Because at our level, if we're honest, what we're mainly concerned with is our problems. And if we're honest, most of our goals are concerned with me, with my life. with my welfare. So this Bodhisattva attitude of forgetting about oneself and working for others can seem something very far, very distant from where we actually are now. But this shouldn't be an obstacle. It shouldn't be an obstacle to taking the Bodhisattva vows, because it is the practice. It's through practice, again and again, generating this motivation in our mind, becoming slowly, more and more familiar with it, familiar with this Bodhisattva attitude, and reducing with the practice this self-cherishing thought. So there's some people who, when they hear about this attitude, Bodhisattva attitude, they think, oh, it's impossible, I'm not capable of doing this, but we shouldn't think like that. We have the potential. And the way to develop that potential, to develop this attitude of bodhicitta, is by practicing again and again, developing and generating in our mind again and again, and becoming familiar with it. Until in time, this thought will arise spontaneously, sincerely. But the work is to practice it again and again. So we take these Bodhisattva vows now, when we take a tantric initiation. But then afterwards, we should take them again on our own 6 times, 3 times during the day and 3 times during the night. But if we take them 50 times a day, even better. The idea is to repeat it again and again, to become familiar with it. See, right now our mind is egocentric, critical, judgmental. It's because we have that habit from the past. And in our lives, and the type of lives we lead, if we're not careful, we're just constantly planting the seeds to increase this self-cherishing thought. As Rinpoche mentioned yesterday, in the West, what we do is we kind of encourage this I, this false I. So in the West, Rinpoche mentioned, it seems that we sort of try and make stronger this false I. Everything we do seems to put emphasis on this false I, on this grasping. And that's why it becomes so difficult for us to completely, radically change this self-grasping, self-cherishing. So we repeat this prayer. I'm going to carry out this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings in order to achieve enlightenment. We repeat these types of prayers again and again. And if we repeat it enough, it becomes so familiar that it just appears easily, without effort, without having to think about it. Spontaneously, it will arise in our mind, and slowly, with time, we'll be able to strengthen it and make it one with our mind. So through repetition, through familiarity, through practice, we can develop this thought in our mind. So we should avoid throwing rubbish in our mind, planting rubbish seeds. And start to sow positive seeds, the seeds of these aspirational bodhicitta thoughts. Regarding the Bodhisattva vows, there's 18 root vows and 46 secondary vows. So there's a lot to see, to go through. But basically, it's changing that self-cherishing attitude. Instead of thinking, I is the most important, I is the center of the universe, now we start to put others as the most important. So they're all advice in this direction. So I'll just read briefly the 18 root vows. And tomorrow, if we have time, we'll comment them. So the first vow is praising myself and belittling others. Praising oneself, criticizing others, with the wish to be admired, with a strong grasping attachment to the I, wanting to receive gifts, admiration, fame. So if we're honest and we check up, we fall into this negative habit quite easily. So this is the first Bodhisattva vow, first of the root vows, to avoid. So the second vow is not sharing my wealth or the Dharma. The third, not forgiving, even if others apologize. Someone who we've offended apologizes and we don't forgive them. So the fourth would be doubting and denying the Mahayana, or criticizing the Mahayana teachings. The fifth, taking offerings intended for the triple gem. So it's stealing something given to the three jewels for oneself. The sixth is abandoning the Dharma through sectarianism. The seventh, disrobing monks or nuns, causes someone to abandon their ordination and their vows, or break them. So the eighth is committing the 5 heinous crimes, as like killing one's mother and father, killing an arhat, creating disharmony in the Sangha, creating division in the Sangha community, or causing bodily harm to a Buddha. So the ninth is holding distorted views, such as rejecting the law of karma. The fifth is destroying places such as towns, places where lots of people live, or lots of beings abide. The next one is teaching emptiness to those who are untrained, teaching emptiness to those who aren't prepared to hear teachings on this subject. The next one, discouraging others from full enlightenment. So we discourage the practitioner of the Mahayana path, so they abandon that path and fall to a lower path, like the Hinayana path. The next vow, causing others to break their Pratimoksha vows, causing them to think that it's not important to keep these vows, and thereby breaking them. The next vow, belittling those who follow Hinayana, being disrespectful towards the Hinayana path. Then comes proclaiming false realizations of voidness or emptiness. And the next is this one that we just mentioned, proclaiming false realizations of voidness or emptiness, would be tricking someone into thinking that we have that realization, when in reality we haven't. And then comes accepting gifts of what has been seized from the triple gem. Next one, passing false judgment. So in a Dharma community, making up unjust laws or rules. The next one, giving up Bodhichitta. Giving up Bodhichitta occurs when we think, I'm not going to work for the benefit of this being. someone who we don't like, who annoys us, or our enemy, thinking I'm not going to work for their benefit, I'm not going to lead them to enlightenment. The moment we have that thought, we're giving up bodhicitta. So these are the root vows. Tomorrow, if we have time, we might be able to go over them a bit more, but it's good to become familiar with these, to know them, to remember them, and to try to abide by them, to avoid these in our daily life. So now we'll dedicate the time we've got left for questions. So thanks ever so much, Venerable Jesus, for these teachings. So I wanted to ask you if we're going to receive refuge, if there's going to be some kind of refuge ceremony during the initiation. And another question I would like to ask for a practice, if you can recommend us something, recommend a practice to those of us who are very new to Buddhism, to help us become closer to the Dharma, to start practicing. Regarding refuge, yes, Rinpoche said, that as there are people here who want to receive the initiation and who haven't received refuge, Rinpoche will give refuge here. Now, if Rinpoche does this in a more elaborated way or not, we don't know. But yeah. Yeah, Rinpoche is aware that there are people here who want to receive refuge, who haven't taken refuge before, and has said that he will include that in the initiation. Anyway, if we take Bodhisattva vows, we always take refuge beforehand. So even if there isn't an elaborate refuge ceremony, in the moment that we recite the refuge verse before taking the Bodhisattva vows, that person has received refuge. So we'll see, but yeah, it's in the program to give refuge and then Bodhisattva vows. Refuge is super necessary to be able to take the Bodhisattva vows and to be able to take the initiation. Regarding your question about a simple practice that we can do that we can share with new people. It depends. There's so many different techniques, so many different methods and practices. For example, the one that we've been doing here in the beginning, the 3 parts, sitting down for a few minutes, just watching the breath, then think that light comes and purifies us completely of all the negative aspects of us. And then the 3rd part, trying to transmit, to radiate that to others. This is a very simple meditation that anyone can do. You can explain this in 5 minutes, and it is something that is really beneficial. Apart from this practice, there's loads of different meditations, simple ones. The fact is that the best motivation, the most effective meditation for a person, it kind of depends on the situation, on the individual. For some people, one practice, one meditation might be really inspirational, really useful. For another person, not so much. So we should try and put into practice. We should try it ourselves first, put it into practice ourselves. And then as we see the benefits, and as we see how it helps, then we can share and advise others. If we don't have the experience ourselves, just recommending books is maybe it's useful, maybe not. But the authentic advice is when someone, through their own experience, through their practice, can understand for that person, for that situation, what the most effective method, the most effective meditation will be. So my advice in this way, depending on the knowledge that you have on meditation and Buddhism, from what you understand, from what you see as beneficial, you put into practice yourself, and then through your experience, what benefits you, what benefits your life, you can transmit to others. So the best way to help others is to put the Dharma into practice ourselves. And then that teaching that we understand, that practice that we understand, that we've integrated, that has touched us, that has touched our hearts. Based on that experience, and the way that transforms our mind, that's what we're going to be able to transmit to others. We can only give to others what we have ourselves. If we have a mind full of judgmental, critical views, we transmit that confusion to others. If we transmit that peaceful state of mind, spontaneous mind, that is what we transmit to others. So if we want to benefit the world, we need to start with ourselves. We need to organize our own mind, eliminate the confusion within ourselves. Only then can we really change ourselves and change the world. Hello, good morning, Jesus. So firstly, I'd like to thank you ever so much. It's something I think that we all share, this gratitude for your teachings, your explanations. So this is a quick question. The 6-session Guru Yoga practice that we recite 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. There might be something I'm doing wrong. So there's some verses that you recite on the first round once, and on the second recitation you don't recite. So she's reciting the Bodhisattva Vows just once. Should she be reciting these 3 times? So if you have this practice of the 6-session Guru Yoga, in the practice it has the explanation what verses to recite 3 times, what verses to recite once. The explanation is there. So it's just really to follow the instructions that are in the text. If you have any confusion, then just ask someone who you know who's practicing this, has more experience. But normally, the 6-session Guru Yoga in the booklet, it says what you should recite, how many times. Yeah, it's better to ask someone who's doing this regularly and check with them. But yeah, it's all in the text. Good morning. Thanks for everything you've given us. So I'm very new to Dharma in our center in Barcelona. I don't have much time, but I'm really keen to take refuge, take Bodhisattva vows, but I don't have really much time to dedicate to these practices. So have you got a practice that's very brief, something that we can do 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night? So have you got a short, brief prayer that can help us in our spiritual evolution and our daily practice that doesn't take up too much time? So as we said, refuge is the door to enter into the Buddhist practice. So there's a very simple practice of going for refuge, which includes all the essential points. So we can combine this with our meditation on the breath. I'm not sure, but maybe in the bookshop outside, maybe they have, but there's a small booklet about refuge, which I think I have here in my tablet. So in this abbreviated practice, you recite refuge and the Bodhichitta prayer, then we recite the 4 immeasurable thoughts. So these 4 immeasurable thoughts is an excellent practice. Recite these 4 and meditate in them. Then comes a motivation for the daily life. Generate a good motivation. And then finally the dedication of the merits. So there's three lines for dedicating the merits, the positive energy. So depending on the time we have, we can meditate on these 4 immeasurables. If we don't have much time, we can recite all 4 and meditate on them. Or if we have more time, we can concentrate on one, and then the second day, then the second one. Every day meditating on one of these 4 immeasurable thoughts. So in this practice, there aren't the Bodhisattva vows. We just have to add that verse that I mentioned, that prayer that I mentioned earlier, just as the Buddhas of the past, that one. So doing this brief refuge practice and then reciting that Bodhisattva prayer, just to the Buddhas of the past, etc. Just as they develop bodhicitta, I too will now develop bodhicitta. Just as they in the past practiced the 6 perfections, I'm going to put into practice these 6 perfections for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we include this verse. This could be a really good daily practice, very complete. Thanks again for your reflections. So Rinpoche mentioned that life's like a hallucination. So I didn't quite understand that. I wasn't sure of the order. Rinpoche says first we perceive, then we label, then we grasp concepts, something like that. No, it's Jesus says no. It's nothing. It's not at all easy. There's a lot of details, but in general, we can say that the way it happens, the way ignorance works, the way ignorance distorts. Firstly, due to past, previous karmic imprints. From the moment we're born due to causes and conditions from the past. These causes and conditions are stained, they're contaminated. So we're born with that contamination. We're born with that, and so we perceive the world through that contamination. So firstly, it's that basic ignorance, that obstacle to seeing things how they exist. Due to these clouds, these veils, which obscure our perception of reality. So this causes something to appear which in reality isn't there. Like the example yesterday of the shadow. Due to the conditions of darkness, if there was light, we would see immediately there's no one there. We wouldn't see the shadow, but due to the conditions, lack of light, we see a shadow. And because our mind is in a anxious state, we label, there's a person coming to hurt me. We're alone, isolated, maybe in a forest or in a faraway place. We have fear, we see a shadow, we see something move, and we believe that someone's coming to hurt me. Now, that person that we imagine there is a creation of our mind due to those causes and conditions. Due to the conditions of darkness, the fear, the mind invents, the mind makes up an enemy. It's a shadow or it's tree branches moving in the wind, but the mind hallucinates something which isn't there. So these are the steps. First, the conditions, the darkness, the shadow that we see, the mind, the consciousness which is in a agitated state, has fear, anxiety. These conditions causes our mind to hallucinate, causes our mind to create a person, an enemy, someone coming to hurt us, when in reality, there's nothing there. So the mind then grasps at that and believes it. So these are the different phases, these obscurations, the hallucination, and then the grasping, and then we become completely convinced that it's like that. If we had a calm mind, for example, we didn't have that anxiety, fear, maybe we see that shadow or that tree branch in the window moving, but we don't imagine that there's a person coming to attack us. So it could happen that the first condition is there, the darkness, the shadow, but if from the side of the person in the mind, if they didn't add that condition of someone's coming to harm me, or maybe if the physical condition outside, if there was light, or if the person had a torch and could see clearly through the window. So the first phase is those physical conditions. Then the second phase is the mind itself. And then the third stage of being completely convinced that what our mind is imagining is true. In the same way, in our lives, everything we see, everything we perceive is like shadows. Shadows or stains from ignorance. Due to past karmic actions, due to the ignorance in past lives. Our mind doesn't see it as a collection of conditions. Like in a dream. Whilst we're dreaming, we don't realize that we're dreaming. We believe it 100%. But in the same way in our daily lives, where there isn't an independent identity, an intrinsic existence, we hallucinate one. We see things as inherently existing from their own side. The example of the dream is an easy analogy to understand because we've had that experience. So what we perceive in our life is like in a dream. So as Rinpoche said, we have to analyze, we have to take apart how we perceive the world, how we perceive ourselves, and begin to realize that what we perceive is a mere projection of our mind. Our mind creates objects. We can refer to any phenomena, people, objects. To us, they appear as an entity. The bowl here. The bowl appears to us as a true, concrete, existing entity. A bowl. But there's many ways to do this. We should analyze that, in fact, this bowl exists independent of causes and conditions. Bowl, in reality, is just a concept. Other than the concept bowl, there's nothing there which is a bowl. But when we see bowl, we don't think, oh, it's a concept that my mind has created. We don't see that at all. We see a real bowl, concrete, solid bowl, solid entity there, bowl. So we should start to see how our mind creates things. So scientists also, the quantum physics, scientists explain this. There isn't a truly existing entity there. In reality, what the scientists say is that there is a collection of particles or collection of parts that we name, that we label. So if we take this apart, we can begin to see that the conceptual mind labels and creates things where there isn't a thing. The reality is that this thing is changing all the time. However, the bowl we perceive is a solid concrete bowl that doesn't change. It's nothing more than a mind creation. And if we analyze everything, it's in the same way. They exist in the same way. So this analysis is not difficult to understand, that things are empty of inherent existence. This is just the first step. If we just stay in this step, our mind is so habituated, so familiar. It's something that we need to meditate on again and again until we generate an experience, a real direct experience of this within us. It's a topic which we should analyze and investigate and reflect on again and again. It's not easy, but it's important to try and understand the reality. And for that we use examples. The example of like a dream is perfect. If we analyze, our life is like a dream. If we could see our consciousness in the moment of death, when everything comes to an end, could arrive tomorrow, could arrive next month, when that moment of death arrives, when that consciousness separates, we'll see that this life, all these experiences we've had, all the people we've met, all the places we've gone, everything we've done in this life was like a dream. The only thing left is the memory or the imprints. Everything that we encountered in this life, we won't be able to find again. Every life is the same. It's like a dream, whether the dream lasts 1 minute, 1 year, or 60 years, 70 years, it's the same. Like a dream, it passes. So if we meditate in this, we can loosen our grasping on solid concrete existence. This isn't just an intellectual philosophy to debate and to discuss. This is a base to meditate on. This is something to meditate on, to analyze, to investigate. And when we understand this, that what we perceive is not necessarily the way things exist, then we should sit and meditate on it. This is how the teachers of the past have practiced. And those who have achieved realizations, they practiced in this way. Can you explain the difference between Jenang, which is a permission to practice, or a Wang, or a great initiation? So in general, there's that difference between a complete initiation. So these initiations usually take 2 days. There's a preparation and then the actual initiation. If we've received a complete initiation, if we've already received an initiation, a complete initiation, then we can receive a jenang, which is that permission to practice. So the jenang is a briefer practice, a briefer ceremony, and gives us the permission to practice a certain deity. So if we've received a complete initiation, this qualifies us to receive jenangs or permissions to practice other deities. We become sort of capable to be able to receive these jenangs, and they have the same value as an initiation. So there's deities which we receive, usually the jenang, and other deities which we receive their complete initiation. The way we should perceive the teacher is the same in both cases, whether it's a jenang or whether it's a complete initiation. The deity is one with the Buddha. The deity is that state that we wish to achieve. So with the compassion and with the Buddha of compassion, or with the white umbrella deity, is a manifestation of the compassion Buddha. We take this initiation to be able to achieve that enlightened state. The deity, we can say, is the Buddha and is inseparable from the teacher. That person which is transmitting, connecting us to this deity. And this deity is our own potential of achieving Buddhahood. That's why it's so important to see the teacher, the deity, and our mind as inseparable, as pure. And the connection we have with the teacher is exactly the same in the case of a jenang or an initiation. We should develop this pure view of the teacher, the deity, and our mind as inseparable. And that's why we have the sadhana, the practice, the mantras that we recite, is all to achieve this, to clean our mind, to purify our mind, so that our pure state can manifest the state of enlightenment. And to achieve this, the teacher and the deity, that our teacher introduces to is to help us achieve this enlightened state, this experience.
Thank you again so much for sharing your knowledge.
Thanks again for sharing.
Question about
It's in English.
Especially our teachers. I mean, in our minds. How do we find?
I'll repeat it in case you can't hear it. Can't hear it properly.
Between having trust in those who guide us and analyzing, checking the logic of actions, especially when we're at a lower level in our practice.
So the question is in relation to not seeing defects in the teacher, especially for us at a beginner's level. The question is how we can equalize that faith that sees the teacher as completely pure, and the not analyzing and not So yeah, how to deal with when we see faults, when we see defects in the teacher. So on the one hand, the question is really about faith and pure view, and then analyzing and investigating the qualities of the teacher. So Jesus says this is something that's difficult, something not easy. We should try and, especially in Tantra, see the teacher, the deity, as something completely pure, and to carry out this practice. This is a method to purify our mind and to reach that state, the state of that deity. So it's true. For us, the teachers appear as ordinary beings, and they act ordinarily sometimes, showing defects, which can be difficult to, makes it difficult to see this person as a Buddha, as an enlightened being. So this capacity to see the teacher as a Buddha, so there are people with a really pure view who can, from day one, see their teacher as a Buddha, who find it really easy to see their teacher as enlightened Buddha, even though they show mistakes and defects. But for us, as a rule, it's difficult to avoid seeing defects, seeing impurities. So in order to develop this in the text, it goes through different steps to develop the faith. To develop that mind which can see the teacher as pure and perfect. So in the beginning, before we take a person as our spiritual teacher, our guide, we need to analyze, we need to check up. We shouldn't just take anybody. Oh, now this person's my teacher. That's very risky. Then we discover defects, we discover negative aspects, then we change our mind, then we want to change our teacher like we change our partner. So it's something we need to take very seriously. The relationship with the spiritual guide is something which is going to lead us to enlightenment. And it's a very special relationship, so we should take it very seriously and check up. And then once we've taken someone as our guide, as our spiritual teacher, there are practices, there are meditations which can strengthen this pure view. We have the capacity to see someone, even if they show negative aspects, if we train our mind, if we understand all these points that they mention, we can perfectly transform our view and see this person as a Buddha. And if we have this pure attitude, it doesn't matter. Maybe the person isn't a Buddha, it does have a lot of defects. For us, it's going to work as if that person was a Buddha and will lead us to enlightenment. So, to receive the benefits of a Buddha doesn't actually depend whether the teacher is a Buddha or not. It depends on us. It depends on us seeing that person as a Buddha. Buddha is in everyone, Buddha is everywhere. But we don't receive the blessings of the Buddha because we block them. We label, we criticize, we judge, we see defects. So whilst our mind is seeing faults and defects, that impedes the blessings, the light of Buddha entering us and blessing us. So we are blocking it ourselves. So when we see someone like Dalai Lama Zopa Rinpoche, full of virtues, there's no doubt that they're special beings. We can see many virtues, many qualities. That person helps us connect with the Buddha. In fact, it is the Buddha arising and those positive aspects. And if we strengthen that view and practice that view, there's no doubt we'll receive the blessings of Buddha. Through His Holiness Dalai Lama, through Lama Zopa Rinpoche, or whoever, whatever being, whatever person. Whether we receive the blessing or not depends on us, depends on our pure view, depends on our pure mind. And our pure view, our pure mind depends on our practice. So there's various techniques and advice of how to deal with the situation when we perceive defects, when we have a confused mind, difficult situations. There's meditations which are directed specifically, detailed meditations over this. So there's a book from Lama Zopa called The Root of the Path, which talks in detail about this. Gives the detailed meditations on this topic. So it's getting a bit late, we'll leave it here. We'll dedicate the merits. So we dedicate all these merits for the full enlightenment, for the benefit of all sentient beings, for the Dharma to expand and flourish, to expand in all directions, for us to be able to achieve the enlightened state. Rinpoche, Pana Ke Juchi, Kya Pa Nyam Pa Me Pa Ya, Gone Gondu Pe Wa Shu. Kawe Kowe Shinkande, Pendan De Wa Ma Lu Jo Wa Ne, Sene Ze Wan Den Zing Ga So Di, Sepe Sete Badu Ten Yu Chi. Thank you.